Hello stitchy friends, it's Shari. Today I'm stitching up the POSHTA design Humming Hive using some cotton quilting fabric. So here is the basic hive. You will cut out the basic shape and then you will run that shape through the die cut machine a second time with the details die that cuts those horizontal lines. This is how we're going to sew on the segments of our beehive. And for this project, I'm using Terial Magic to treat my cotton pattern quilting fabric to make it stiff and easy to die cut. And you can always go and check out the Snowy Friends video to see exactly how this works. So you do get a stitching guide with this die that shows you what order you need to stitch these segments in. And for this die, we want to start at the bottom and work our way up so that the layer above overlaps the layer below. And I just had a few little holes that I still needed to poke out on this layer. So you can see I have my bottom pieces and the one above, and I'm going to go ahead and put that opening into the hive, which is cut from a gray piece of fabric, at the same time as I stitch these together. And I am going to show you a little later when I do the other side that I did it a little bit differently. So I'm just starting on the right side and I am doing a running stitch over to the opening. Then I'm going to layer over that piece of fabric and I'm going to go down to the bottom with my running stitch. This will stitch together the gray piece and the yellow piece to the piece of felt. Once I get to the bottom, I'm going to come back up, fill in those stitches that I skipped. So now from that halfway point down to the bottom, we have all our stitches. Then I'm going around the top of the arc with that running stitch. And I'm going to continue on down to the bottom on this left side. When I get to the bottom, I'll go back up, but this time I'm going to stop at the halfway point and I'm going to continue my horizontal line between those two yellow pieces of fabric over to the left side. And I just use the clip to kind of hold those pieces on. Now that I'm all the way to the left side, I can go back with that running stitch, filling in, so you can see there now those stitches are getting filled in. I'll jump back over to the top of the arch, kind of go across that over to the other side, and then finish off my stitching on the right side of this piece of yellow fabric. Then I'm going to tie a knot, but I'm not going to trim off my floss. This is 3 strands of floss. I'm going to keep using it until I need a new piece. So I'm layering on that third piece, and instead of starting on the far right, I kind of started a couple stitches in so that any knots I tie will be a little more inside the center of the hive rather than right on the edge. So I did my running stitch from that point where I started over to the right, which is just a few stitches, and then I stitched back, and now I'm continuing on going towards the left with the running stitch. So you can see there are a couple stitches filled in on that far right, and then where I'm stitching now is just every other stitch. Once I get over here to the left, I will go back the other direction and fill them in. And once I get back to where I started, I will just tie this piece off. I don't think I have enough left to do another line. So what I'm going to do, since I'm not where the tail is I will just loop my floss underneath one of those stitches on the back side and tie off in a loop. So I'm just making a loop, then I'll go back through and make a knot. And then I can just trim off those tails. So you can see there how there was that diagonal line of floss on the back. It's a little hard to see because I am using a cream colored floss which matches the felt. So now I'm moving on to the next piece, which is number 4, and I'm doing the same thing I did on all of the others, starting on the right, going towards the left with a running stitch, and then I'll work my way back. Now on this particular project, I am only stitching the fabric directly to the felt base, but you could also cut all of these layers out of felt and layer the fabric on top and get a more dimensional look. It just depends on the look you want to go for, and that's actually a technique that I should try because I think it would give it a really cool look. It'll show the layers a lot more. So I've gotten over to the other end, I tied off my string, but I'm not trimming off that long piece. I'm just going to move up to the next segment above. And this is a great project to use scraps of fabric for because the pieces are not very big, especially that little one you see there, that's the topper, it is tiny. So repeating that same process before, I went to the right, came back a little bit, now I'm going to the left, and then I'll come back and fill in with that running stitch. The reason I don't go right to the edge is because this beehive tapers in and I want to make sure that the floss that is running on the back stays nice and tucked in towards the center of the shape. And then finally we have this little one here that's about 4 little stitches there, and now we've done all of our horizontal lines, and I'm just going to run that through a stitch, loop it around, and tie it off on the back. And I actually realized when I was stitching these together that there was one stitch I didn't go far enough on this side right here, so I needed to add one more stitch to that horizontal line to fill it in all the way, because you want to make sure that all you have left is the outline where you're going to join your two pieces together. And I did it on both sides, so I just stopped one too short on both sides of this piece. But that's really easy to just add in that one stitch there. All right, now this side is done, and I'm actually going to make a second side exactly the same. So here are all the pieces. I am not going to make you watch me stitch this together. Through the magic of television, it is done. But I did the opening a little different on this one. I stitched across all those horizontal lines, and when I got to that opening there, I just skipped over to the other side, and then I'm going to stitch the whole gray opening as one piece. So you can do either way. It just depends on what you feel works best for you. If trying to put all 3 of those pieces together at the same time is a bit much, you can just add this at the end. So I'm just doing the running stitch from the bottom right around the arch to the left, and then I'm going back, and I will tie this off at the end. So now I have 2 pieces that look exactly alike, and for this project I'm actually making a pick with a little wooden dowel to stick into a flower arrangement. So to stuff this, I want to keep that flat look. I am using my die to just trace around on a piece of scrap quilt cotton batting, just the inside, so you see I'm tracing inside the holes, and I'll just cut this out with my scissors. This doesn't have to be perfect, just the general shape. And you can see I just traced a little outline there where my wooden dowel is going to go. So I will cut these out. And I'm actually going to use this first one as a template for the second one for that dowel opening. And the reason why I'm cutting this little void for the dowel is so that I don't get any bulk where I'm going to insert that into the beehive. So it's going to create a void and that dowel will just nest in there nicely. So I'm using this to trace where that dowel is going to be on the second piece. You can add as many pieces of batting as you want, or you could also stuff this with polyfill. But I like using the batting because I can just layer the 2 pieces and make this sandwich of my stitched piece on the outside, the batting on the inside, and then my other piece on the back. And I'm just adding a little bit of hot glue. I'm going to stick that dowel in there. You are going to see me add a little more glue as I go so that this dowel stays in place. I'm actually going to put it on the dowel this time, kind of around the other side, so that I can stick it and kind of turn it around in there and make sure it's stuck to both sides. That also makes sure it stays nice and straight too. So now I have my little sandwich made, I'm ready to stitch, and I'm starting down here right at the dowel. I want to start my first stitch between the front and the back layer, so that tail that's hanging out there is coming out between my stitch layers, and I am just going to go around with a running stitch. I am going to grab some clips here just to hold my 2 pieces lined up together until I get my stitching around to that point, just so they don't shift as I'm working. And I ended up adding one on this side as well. And for this particular project, I only went around the outside once with that running stitch. a little more glue. But I only went around once because I liked the way it looked and it ended up nice and even. But I am going to show you another project where I went back and filled in all the stitches. Just depends on the look you want for your project. So I've gotten all the way around. I'm back to the bottom down here. And I'm just working my way over to where I started. Now, when I get to where I started, it doesn't end up exactly even. You're going to end up with either two stitches right next to each other or two voids right next to each other. I left it as two voids because obviously I have a wooden dowel here. And that's really hard to stitch through. But I am going to add a bow at the base right here, so it's going to be hidden a bit and it didn't really bother me. So I'm tying my two tails together. Make sure I do a double knot there. And then I will thread these into my needle and thread them up into the hive and out the fabric and trim off the tails. I wasn't sure if this would leave like a hole in my fabric, so what you're going to see me do is I actually ended up threading it right out the side of the hive versus poking through the fabric. But I did poke through the fabric on another project and it worked out fine. So I'm going right in, right beside that wooden dowel, and you're going to see me poke this needle all the way over to come out between the two felt layers on the side. And of course, I'll do the same with the other tail. They were a little fuzzy from all the stitching, so I did have to trim them off a little bit to have a nice tail to thread into my needle. But I'm doing the same with this, right in beside the wooden dowel, and then out the other side. My needle was just barely long enough to do this technique coming out the side. So there is my first fabric beehive here. And for this one to finish it off, I am going to add a little bow. And so I have some ribbon that is a green and cream gingham ribbon. I'm just going to tie the bow. You could tie the bow around the dowel if you wanted to. I think my bows are a little nicer when I can tie them by themselves like this and kind of mess with them, not worrying about them looping around something. Get them nice and tight, and then I just glued it in place with a little bit of hot glue. That way it's also assured not to go anywhere. So I'm just making sure it looks nice, making sure it's nice and tight. It takes a little fussing to make sure those tails kind of hang down the way I want them to. And then a little dot of hot glue, and that will hold this in place. And of course, the tails are always longer, so we can trim them off to the length that we want them. And now this cute little pick is ready to stick into a flower arrangement on my dining room table. Now this is the exact same method that I did on the other Humming Hive, but just with different colors. So for this one, I picked 6 different colors to make a rainbow beehive. And again, this is treated with that Terial Magic, so they are easy to die cut. And then I have my base just as before. And I did keep this in here to show you before I just showed you I had stitched across it and then I added the dark piece for the opening, and I thought I'd show you exactly what that kind of looks like. So you stitch one side, then I'm going to layer in that other purple side on the bottom, make sure the holes line up, and I'm just skipping over to the other side. So on the back, you're going to have that long piece of floss that just crosses over. Just make sure you don't pull it too tight. Make sure that's loose because you don't want your hive to bow up. And of course, once I get to the bottom down there, I'm going to go back up. Or if I get to the left, I'm going back to the right. Either way, I'm just holding this one up and down because it's a little easier for me to stitch up and down. And then of course you're going to skip back over it when you go back. So you're going to have these two pieces of floss across that opening on the back side. Again, just don't pull it too tight, and this is an easy method to do this. But just as before, I am starting at the bottom, layering all these pieces as I go. I do think it's helpful, for me at least, to lay them out in the proper order as you see them there on the left side in my little tray, because then I don't accidentally pick up the wrong one. They're pretty obvious where they go, but it still helps keep me organized. So I did make a rainbow on this one because I love adding a rainbow to almost anything that I can, but I think that this humming hive would be really fun in all kinds of different colors. You could do different shades of blue or pink, something fun like that, just using different fabrics. And for this particular one, I actually am not making it a pick and I'm not making it an ornament. This one's just going to be as it is. It's a little bowl filler to put in the dough bowl on my coffee table just to kind of have a little pop of color with my summer decorations. So at this point, I have all of my colored pieces on there, and I'm going to go back in and do the little opening. Now for this one, I started at the top of the arch and went down the right side, back up past the center, down to the left bottom, and then back to the middle. So I could tie my knot up here within the shape of the beehive versus down on the edge seam. And I did a back that matches the front, but you could also just do a solid back if you wanted. Now for this one, I'm stuffing it with that quilt batting again. I have 3 layers. Again, this is a bowl filler, so I don't have a wooden dowel that I need to make room for, and I don't have a hanger that I'm going to use. So I like to put just a couple dots of tacky glue between my layers of batting just to kind of hold it in place as I stitch, especially because this one's got 3, so it's kind of fat. We're going to have a fat sandwich here. So you can see there's a nice void between the front and the back. We're going to pull those together as we stitch. So we want to start again with 3 strands of floss between the layers. You see I'm only going through that front felt layer and that tail is coming out in between. And I will do my running stitch around. I think this bottom center right here is a great place for your knots to go, so that's why I'm starting there. And I'm going to do my running stitch all the way around this one. And then I will go back on this one, filling it in so that I get a nice solid stitch around the outside edge that matches my stitches on the inside. Especially on this one because I think you see that cream colored floss a lot more on the colored pieces of fabric. So I wanted it to match really well. So I've gotten back around to where I started right here. I'm going to do this last stitch, and this is where I usually kind of just look at it. So this one ended up even. I have an even number of stitches, but I didn't like the way that skip stitch looked because I could see it too much and it looked so different from the solid ones that were horizontal. So for this one, I'm going to go back around and fill in so we have a nice solid cream stitching line all the way around and everything matches. And I realized I didn't quite have enough to make it all the way, so I'm adding a second string. So this tail from the first one comes out in between the layers, and then I started a new one, and then I'll tie the 2 ends together just like this, and I tie 2 knots. Make sure that knot gets buried between the 2 layers of felt. And then I usually worry about hiding my tails at the end unless they're getting in your way. You could go ahead and bury them in there if you wanted. I just usually leave them and kind of do cleanup at the end with all the tails I need to hide. So I'm just finishing off the rest of my stitches with this new piece of floss. I really didn't want to have to play thread chicken at the end. I actually stitched a bunch of stitches, realized it was so short I took them out, so I had enough space to have a nice long tail to tie together and hide. So these last few stitches I'm going to end up where this tail is, come out between the 2 pieces of felt, tie these 2 tails together so that knot gets buried in there, and then I actually grabbed a longer needle or a needle with a smaller eye too to thread these through, and I'm coming out in the fabric on this one, and you didn't really see the hole that much. I am going to kind of scratch it with my fingernail, make sure those fibers go back together the way they should. And of course, I'm going to do the same thing with all these other tails that I have here. And of course, we need to hide the 2 tails on the side as well. I managed to be able to thread both of them through one needle this time, which is always kind of fun that you can take care of 2 at once. And then here is my finished rainbow humming hive with that pattern cotton quilting fabric. So here are the 2 projects together. I really love the way they turned out with the pattern details. Now, if you were doing these from felt, I think a rainbow felt one would be really cute as well, or one that alternates colors like the cream and yellow. And if you didn't have the patterns going on, that's a great opportunity to embellish even more with maybe a little felt bee or flowers. Of course, sequins are always great as well. These have a more primitive look to me with a very quilted look, and that was the look I was going for, and I love how they turned out. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you have an amazing day and happy stitching. Bye!